Hey, welcome to or back to my channel. I did my makeup. What do you think? You know, quarantine looks. So, as you can see by the title, today we're going to address my eating disorder or my anorexia story. So, basically, before I get into it, major trigger warning. This story involves, obviously, eating disorders, anorexia, treatment, and some depression and suicidal thoughts. So if any of those trigger you, please take this time to scoot your boot and exit out of the video. So, getting into it. Growing up, I never really cared about what I ate. I was like a normal kid. I just kind of ate, like mac and cheese, chicken fingers, like that kind of stuff. So then when I got to 6th grade, I started to pay attention to how my body looked because the guys started talking about women's bodies. They started talking about how hot Kate Upton was. So, being 12, I would look at these girls like Kendall Jenner and Kate Upton and be like, why don't I look like that? I was 12, that's why. Actually, I think I was like 11. Anyway, so... Also, I should mention that because I was tall, and I still am tall, or on the taller side, people would often ask like, oh, to my parents, like, oh, is she gonna get into modeling, or are you thinking about getting into modeling, or anything like that. So also, like, I was aware of that, so I had this tendency to compare myself to other models, and be like, oh wow, that girl's really skinny and has like really nice abs, and I don't have any of that, and like, I don't even have a butt. Because I was 11. Anyway, so during this time, I started being like, you know what, I'm gonna start experimenting with diets. I swapped out a lot of things. Like, I used to swap like cream cheese for like low-fat cream cheese, or like carb thins, or like bagel thins for regular bagels, just things like that. And also during this time that I learned what exactly calories were and what they did in the body, which actually like really gave me anxiety, because then I was like, well, if I eat this much, like then that means I have to work it off, right? So it was also just this kind of pressure to, if I did eat something that was like quote unquote bad, like a bagel instead of a bagel thin, then I would have to like work extra hard to exceed the energy off, or work the energy off. Yeah, so then I did start to get into diet culture, and my thoughts around food were very like either good or bad. Yeah, so the summer before 7th grade, I submitted myself to a local modeling / talent agency because that is what I was really interested in, and that still is what I'm interested in. So I submitted myself into that, and I was 13? I was about 13, and I submitted online, and then they were interested, so they said, oh, come in person and we'll interview you. So I did do that, and I actually ultimately got rejected. And I took this rejection very hard. I thought it was because I was not skinny enough. I was not fit for... I was not skinny enough. I was not fit enough. I took it a lot like that. A lot of times modeling agencies just reject you because they have someone that looks like you already, or you're just not what they need at this exact moment, and it has nothing to do with like your weight or anything like that. But that's how I interpreted it, and that is kind of how I really got off the deep end, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna lose a bunch of weight and I'm going to submit to them again, which I actually never submit to them again. So anyway, continuing off of that, I started using like apps like MyFitnessPal for calorie tracking and calories in versus calories out, that sort of thing. And I got very obsessed with it. I got obsessed with how little I could eat. And so towards the end of middle school, I not only had I had full-blown anorexia, I had an exercise addiction, and I had set off an autoimmune disease called Raynaud's syndrome, which basically just means that when you get really cold, the tip of your fingers or toes, they lose circulation and they can get purple or red and they get swollen, and basically it's just your body thinking that you are in Antarctica and it's trying to save you by cutting off, you know, your extremities to keep pumping blood to your heart. So I had set that off, which is actually only set off by either old age or eating disorders / anorexia. So those are the two stressors that will activate the autoimmune disease. So, and at this time I completely lost my period. My hair was starting to fall out and I was freezing all the time. So my parents didn't really understand what was going on with my hands and my feet because they would get very swollen and I would have burst blood vessels just like all over them. And there was one really bad incident in Washington, D.C. in the winter, and everything, it was just, all my hands were completely purple and swollen, and one was completely white, and it was just very painful and very awful. So my parents were really concerned about that, as well as I, because at this point we didn't understand what it was. So that started the journey of going to different doctors to see what it was. So going to different doctors took about a year. We went to like a regular doctor, then we got recommended to a dermatologist, and then we got recommended to a rheumatologist. So by the time I got to the rheumatologist, this is the first time that she took my weight, and then she sat me down and she asked my dad to leave the room. And then she started asking what I ate in a day, and I was like, I had oatmeal today and half of an apple. And she'd be like, how much oatmeal? And I'd be like, I don't know. But I did. I just was almost afraid to tell her because I knew that what I was doing was probably not great, but I didn't want to stop. So at this point, she calls my dad back in and she tells us that I am very underweight for my age and my height, and she gives my dad the number of a doctor that is in the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and that specializes in pretty much like kids that are underweight. So that kind of put the idea in my head that something wasn't going well if I was underweight. After I got back from the doctor, this was the first time that my dad actually thought, you know, maybe something is going on with her eating. Now, my parents are very busy people, like no hate to them at all. I mostly ate alone. I always ate alone. I never really ate at dinner time. If I did eat dinner, I would have it completely different and separate. So a lot of times I just didn't eat with them. So, you know, I didn't see what they were eating and they didn't see what I was eating. And I have two younger brothers that are very active in sports and they're very active in the community. So a lot of times we were just running around and I had like rehearsals for plays and shows. So it was just no blame whatsoever to them. But this was the first time that it was really brought to my parents' attention, and I didn't want it brought to their attention because I knew that I was doing something that was like not good for me. But again, I didn't want to stop because it felt so good, or like it's like the addiction. So at this point, my mom the next day I remember this very clearly, she bought a egg and cheese bagel from this local deli at our house, and she told me to eat it in front of her. And I remember like I took one bite and I swallowed it, and it was like I just felt like I couldn't swallow it and I felt like I was gonna choke. And then also I just got I knew I estimated how many calories were in that sandwich, because when you get to that point you kind of have all the numbers in your head like a mental calculator. And so, you know, I'm not gonna say how many calories I thought it was, but I thought it was a good decent amount of calories, and I did not want to eat it. I was very scared of eating it, and I had a full-blown panic attack at the table in front of both my parents because it was like not humanly possible for me to eat this bagel. So after that, my dad called up the doctor that was recommended to us, and within the next week, I was sent there. And, you know, at first they take your height, they take your weight, they take your vitals. And one thing that was very different is I remember they like would ask me to flip open my pockets, and they would just like almost like pat you down. I don't know, that sounds weird, but they just make sure that you don't have any weights on you that could be, you know, saying that you're in better condition than you are when you're trying to hide something. Literally just looking out for your health. So I went into the room with this doctor, and my dad came with me because at this point I was 15, so I was very young, and I felt more secure with a parental authority person. Yeah, so basically she talked to me first about how I was feeling, and at first I remember I was like, I'm fine, like I feel good, like I don't understand why they're making such a big deal out of it. I'm not that bad, because like I remember passing like girls in the hallway that they looked at, like in such worse condition than me. Like they looked like literally skin and bone. Like I felt like I still had some muscle on me, so I wasn't the same as that. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't as bad as that condition was, and when in reality, like everyone's suffering that went through there. And so I just thought I wasn't worthy of being there, and I thought I was just taking up someone else's time, and I didn't really think I had that big of a problem, and all this and all that. And she really wore me down, and she had me talk about like my feelings, which I never really had before. And we just started talking about like I started talking about my depressive feelings and my suicidal thoughts and my self-harm, and that really was a breakthrough. And then from there we started talking about how that worked its way into my food or vice versa. So that was very, very interesting. And also it was the first time that I got a real answer to why my hair was falling out, why I didn't have a period. And it was basically because, she told me that I was barely eating enough calories to keep my body alive. So your body just starts almost like with the Raynaud's syndrome, it cuts off the extremities, so like the extras that you don't really need. So you don't really need your hair to live. You don't really need, like if you're a woman, you don't really need your period to live. Your body's trying to conserve energy so it can keep your heart beating, it can keep your stomach going. Yeah, so that's basically what it was starting to do. I remember walking out of that appointment. I cried. And I cried really, really hard for a really long time, because it was the first time that I really came out and said that something's wrong with the way I'm eating, something's wrong with the way I'm feeling. And that was very strange for me, especially keeping it bottled up for years and not talking to anyone about it, so that was a huge step in changing my life for the better. So from that day on, I was in outpatient eating disorder treatment, and for the first 2 months, I believe, I went once a week, and then for the next few months, I went once every 2 weeks, and then I went to once a month until the year was over, and I was at a good, healthy weight. Yeah, so I should also mention not just the improvement in my physical body, but I felt happy again. I felt like I could, run to my friends and not be thinking about like, okay, if I run for exactly 5 feet, how many calories does that burn? Like, I'm not thinking about that. Like, I'm more thinking about how good it is to see people or see this and that and just like, live your life. So flash forward to my freshman year of college. I would say I'm fully recovered. You know, you still have some bad days where you remember something or you see a certain kind of food that was a huge fear food for you, and you know, some memories come back. But at that point I was pretty good, and I decided that I wanted to try my dream again of modeling and acting. So I went to a talent and modeling agency in Philadelphia, and they met with me, they signed me, and they have never once made me feel bad about my weight, which I'm very thankful for, because that's not the case with a lot of acting slash modeling agencies, mostly modeling agencies. But yeah, so I've been with them for almost 2 years, so because I'm going into my junior year, and as of right now I'm doing very well. Again, like I said, there's good days, there's bad days, but for the majority it's good. I'm eating definitely a normal amount, quote unquote normal, like everyone's normal is different, but yeah, I basically now I follow intuitive eating, which the intuitive eating book was very helpful, because basically it's just like a giant FU to the diet culture and just accepting yourself and the foods and feeling good about the foods that you put in your body without labeling anything as good or bad. It was just very, very mind-opening and very healthy. And very healthy for me. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that or found that interesting or helpful. This was pretty difficult for me to talk about. I had to write it all down because I knew I would forget a lot of points. I left some stuff out, just like really kind of like graphic stuff, like, you know, no, we don't really need to put that out into the world. You get the gist. So yeah, like or subscribe or whatever. Yeah, so that's about it, and I'll see you next time.